Republic of Congo. Those involved in cross-border trade, particularly between Rwanda and Bukavu, report that business activities have started to return to normal. On the international scene, inflation in the United States increased in January as prices of food, gasoline, and housing, among others, continue to rise. My name is Olim Nete, and it's always a pleasure to have you on board. We'll start from this announcement of the High Commission for the Republic of Rwanda to the UK. Following the summon by the FCDO, the Rwandan High Commission wishes to share the following response. The Rwanda Defense Forces has always maintained defensive measures in response to genuine security threats along our border. These threats recently materialized with the January 26 attacks against the Rubavu border town after the fall of Goma, resulting in 16 deaths and 177 civilian casualties in Rwanda. Rwanda continues to face an existential security threat from the DRC, backed by the FDLR genocidal militia, which was involved in the shelling in Rwandan territory in June 2022, just 2 weeks before the Chogam in Kigali. The FDLR has carried out at least 20 attacks on Rwandan territory and is now embedded within the Congolese army as a strategic ally. Rwanda is a proud contributing country to UN peacekeeping, with a proven record of compliance with every standard, including respect to other missions. However, when MONUSCO becomes entangled with the DRC coalition, which includes and involves the genocidal FDLR, it becomes difficult for everyone to draw clear boundaries. The M23 are Congolese struggling against one of the most violent forms of ethnic extremism meted out to them by their own government over decades, on the watch on the international community, including the UK. This ethnic extremism now assumes regional proportions, and it is imperative that it is rooted out for sustainable peace and development of our region to be realized. The UK should align with and support the AU-backed EAC SADC peace process and avoid emboldening the DRC's position to seek a military-only solution. Moreover, there are critical points that must be pointed out. Contrary to populist rhetoric, FDLR, it isn't an outdated group with aging members. While it is true that the FDLR dates back to 1994, it has continuously reorganized, rearmed, and recruited without hindrances with the backing of the DRC. However, the danger the FDLR represents is not merely its military capacity, but the spread of its anti-Tutsi extremist ideology, which has fueled ethnic violence and persecution for the past 30 years. The unchecked public preaching of ethnic extremism by leaders in Burundi and the DRC, especially the top leaders, while difficult to quantify in numbers, poses a grave regional threat. The resumption of the current armed conflict must be properly understood. The East African Community Regional Force successfully enforced and maintained a ceasefire for 6 months. However, the DRC unilaterally terminated the EACRF mission, not in pursuit of peace, but to wage war. The coalition assembled by the DRC, including FRDC, SAMI RDC, 10,000 Burundian troops, FDLR, European mercenaries, and a vast stockpile of weapons, was not intended for stability, but for the fighting of Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese M23 and an assault on Rwanda. MONUSCO is in its 20th year trying to stabilize EDRC. It has stood by as Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese have suffered the most brutal forms of ethnic persecution and violence. Over the same period, the FDLR has grown in strength, expanded its territory, and gained allied armed groups. MONUSCO's leadership has in fact become intertwined with the FDLR, making it difficult to distinguish where one ends and the other begins. Rwanda has painstakingly built its capacity to ensure the safety and security of its people, while also developing the ability to contribute to regional stability. Meanwhile, the DRC contribution has been to transverse European capitals calling for sanctions against Rwanda, including demanding that Rwanda be barred from contributing troops. This does not in any way contribute to any peace processes. 30 years have passed, yet 6 genocide suspects remain at large in the UK, living at the expense of British taxpayers, while other Western nations have tried extradited or deported genocide suspects. The UK remains the only safe haven in the West. The UK is aware that each extra day is one too many. The FDLR in the DRC, 30 years as well, is just as responsible for the genocide as the suspects residing in the UK. Now that there is the AU, EAC and SADC framework that will address the FDLR issue, we call on the UK to align with and support this framework. And this is the announcement from the High Commission for the Republic of Rwanda to the UK. Now to more news. Rwanda finds that Belgium is deliberately overlooking the root causes of security issues in the Eastern DRC. Instead of addressing from its root causes, Belgium is focusing on calls to suspend development aid. Adam Squizera has more on this.
Rwanda has suspended its development cooperation with Belgium, calling out the European country for leading an aggressive campaign together with DRC to sabotage its access to development finance, including in multilateral institutions. This came at a time when diplomatic relations between Rwanda and Belgium are strained, largely due to Belgium's historical ties with DRC. As a result, Belgium has chosen to take a political side in the Eastern DRC conflict rather than contributing to a lasting solution.
hagati y'u Rwanda n'Ububiligi hari umubano wihariye ushingiye no ku mateka.
Rwanda and Belgium share a unique historical relationship, and the same applies to the DRC. Ideally, Belgium could serve as a mediator, helping the DRC finding a lasting solution. However, it is evident that certain critical information has been overlooked by Belgium, which ultimately led the government of Rwanda to make this decision. Ali Mukurarinda stated that Rwanda's decision to suspend development cooperation with Belgium is primarily driven by its commitment to prioritizing security and safeguarding national sovereignty. In a recent interview with Jeune Afrique, President Paul Kagame explained that countries like Belgium, which threaten Rwanda with aid suspension and sanctions, are deliberately ignoring root causes of the problem, despite having played a role in creating it.
So, and they keep everything is Rwanda, Rwanda. What is, how do you address such a complex and a serious problem by just blaming actually the victim? I even hear, surprisingly, I always hear countries like Belgium talking about Rwanda, asking for punishments for Rwanda, but they are the guys who, they are part of the history, they are part of the problem.
In this statement, the government of Rwanda emphasized that it will not be bullied or blackmailed into compromising national security. It reaffirmed that its commitment to securing its borders and ensuring irreversible end to the politics of violent ethnic extremism in the region. Adam Squizera, RwandaTV News.
Thank you, Adams, for the details. Now to trade activities. Those involved in cross-border trade, particularly between Rwanda and Bukavu, report that business activities have started to return to normal. Crossing hours have been extended until 6 p.m. and the Rusizi District Private Sector Federation highlights that the number of border crossers is expected to increase. We have details. Border crossings between Rwanda and Congolese businesses at the Bukavu border are continuing smoothly, with all types of goods being transported without any obstacles. However, this was not the case 5 days ago, according to Murwanashyaka Emmanuel, a Rwandan businessman who has been operating in Bukavu for 7 years.
I was here last Friday, but today the crossing went smoothly. We were received warmly and everything at the immigration office was in order. We arrived here, opened our businesses safely, and continued our work as usual.
In the city of Bukavu, trade is primarily focused on food. The initial instructions from the DRC stated that the border would close at 3 p.m., but it is now closed at 6 p.m. Both Rwandans and Congolese agree that extending the border opening hours has a significant positive impact on the movement of people, as well as on the functioning and expansion of trade.
La situation était vraiment un peu difficile, c'était vraiment un peu dur.
Previously, things were quite difficult, but now the situation is calm and all neighborhoods are safe. In short, we thank God for granting us lasting peace. If this continues and the border crossing hours are extended, it will be even better without any problems.
When
the places you rely on for living are frequently closed, life becomes challenging. We have long requested an extension of border crossing hours, but to no avail. Now we are pleased that the hours will finally be extended, allowing us the freedom we need.
The city of Bukavu, with a population of approximately 1.5 million people, is home to a border market at the Rusizi border, which unites traders from both Rwanda and the DRC. Activities now appear to be resuming compared to the past few days. Kamuzinzi Godfrey, president of the Rusizi District Private Sector Federation, highlights that extending the border crossing hours will significantly enhance trade operations on both sides of the border.
There were challenges faced with the program established by the DRC of closing borders at 3 p.m., where some traders, especially small traders, who cross with goods every day, would face time constraints and have to leave their goods in Congo. These sometimes led to the losses and many debts. But now that the hours have been increased, people will be able to carry out trade activities smoothly and return home whenever they are done within the new hours given to us.
While the borders remain open, the water transport between Bukavu and Goma operate 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, residents of Bukavu who had fled are returning to their homeland, filled with hope, knowing that security has been restored.
We are returning home after leaving our cars behind in Kamanyora, as some of us are drivers and others are business people. We have now come back because Bukavu is safe. We are confident that the M23 will assure our security.
Rusizi district shares 5 borders with the Democratic Republic of Congo. The district administration affirms that security in Rwanda is intact and encourages residents to continue working towards their development. Now to more news. The senators called on the government to address the ongoing challenges in the agricultural input trade, including revising the Smart Nkunganire program and updating the incentives for agro-dealers to ensure they align with the current needs and developments. We have more. The Senate Plenary Assembly made this decision after reviewing a report on the government's efforts in supplying fertilizers to farmers, in addition to concerns about the outdated Smart Nkunganire program and the insufficient benefits for agro-dealers. The report also highlighted other challenges that hinder the effective provision and utilization of fertilizers by farmers.
Another thing we are showing is inspection of the quality of improved seeds. It is not done accurately due to the fact that RICA doesn't have its own equipment. For RICA to carry out inspection on seeds or even manure, such things usually need a laboratory, and RICA doesn't have its own lab.
Among the senators' requests was a call for research on the characteristics of uncultivated soil to guide the effective use of fertilizers.
The University of Rwanda, as part of its responsibility to conduct research, receives allocated funding for that purpose. Similarly, RICA should also be approached to secure research funding rather than diverting money to other issues. Since all these funds come from the government, RICA should be supported in research efforts. Additionally, institutions such as RAB and others in the agriculture sector should collaborate rather than work independently. Since they all rely on government funding, they should ensure that the money is used effectively to produce tangible results.
Regarding the issue of over 22 billion Rwandan francs in outstanding debts owed by districts to companies supplying agricultural fertilizers, which are hindering investments, the senators called for prompt payment and the revision of prices being paid.
It is shameful to see people constantly coming to the district to ask for their money. This issue should be resolved as it hinders their ability to invest. Another concern is that the pricing system using prices from 2017 is unfair, especially since it has been 8 years and fuel costs have doubled since then. The prices need to be reviewed and updated accordingly.
Following the presentation of the report by the Committee on Economic Development and Finance, the Senate plenary session approved the report and adopted 2 resolutions to be forwarded to the government.
The first resolution is to accelerate the implementation of the research findings on the characteristics of Rwanda soil and to keep this information up to date. This will help to track changes in land conditions and determine the appropriate type of manure needed for different crops. The second resolution focuses on addressing challenges that hinder the fertilizer business. This includes refining the smart Ngungane system, establishing a clear process for obtaining EBM receipts through MOPA, and integrating the system with agro-dealers when they provide fertilizers.
Currently, 85% of Rwanda's agricultural seeds are produced domestically and are provided with fertilizers. A survey by the Rwanda Governance Board revealed that 61.6% of the population is satisfied with the availability of fertilizers, while 60.4% are satisfied with the availability of pesticides. In the second phase of the NST2, it is projected that the use of synthetic fertilizers will increase from 70 kg to 94.6 kg per hectare by 2029. Now to education matters. At the Higher Institute of Applied Sciences, located in the Musanze district in the northern part of Rwanda, new medical programs have been introduced in 6 departments. Nora Gladys has more on this.
These programs are offered in departments such as pharmacy, anesthesia, midwifery, and nursing, all of them at the bachelor's level. There is also a master's level for midwifery and nursing. Students have expressed that they consider this an opportunity they are eager to capitalize on.
We are the first generation of this faculty at Ines Ruhengeri. I think that this opportunity of scholarship will change our lives. First, it will give us career just within the profession. Also, what I think is that within this scholarship, we will just reach our further goals. Just wish at becoming doctors, but concerning on the marks that we got in secondary, the competition was high at UR, but due to scholarship of Minisante, just it's based on the people who didn't get an opportunity just to go in university. But through this scholarship, just we thank Minisante for this opportunity, and we are going to do so hard so that we may reach far as we want it.
These programs were brought to Ines Ruhengeri as part of the initiative to help the Rwandan government achieve its goal of quadrupling the number of people working in healthcare services. Jabo Nicole, the partnerships analyst at the Ministry of Health, mentioned that they are working with various schools in this initiative.
Us as a Ministry of Health, we are very pleased with this important milestone of a university that's portraying these are the types of collaborations and partnerships that we look forward to. Today we were launching new health sciences programs, including degrees in nursing, midwifery, anesthesia, and pharmacy, among others. So this is very important because at the Ministry of Health, we're aiming to increase the number of our healthcare professionals in 4 years in terms of the number, but also in terms of quality. So we were very pleased to see the very good facilities that they have at the university. We saw simulation labs, we got to see the students, and it's also a very good and diverse student body, and we're very pleased for this milestone, and we're here to celebrate with the university.
What's your biggest message to the student here at Ines Ruhengeri and in general?
Yes, that is a very good question. My biggest message to the students here at INES and in general for all of our students that are embarking on these noble causes of pursuing health sciences programs that are much needed in the country is one, we are very grateful that they have embarked on this journey, and our hope for them is that they will have Rwandans at the center of their healthcare delivery services. Once they are focused on Rwandans and giving them the best quality of services that our Rwandans deserve, we believe that this will really guide them in the right direction throughout this process, but even in the future as they continue to specialize in different healthcare programs.
The director of Ines Ruhengeri, further Dr. Baribeshya Jean Bosco, confirmed that the introduction of medical programs is part of the institution's long-term strategy, which began in 2003. Bishop Harerimana Vincent had a message for the students.
Ines Ruhengeri is fully committed to the 4x4 reform, a program that aims at increasing the number of healthcare workers in the next 4 years. Really soon, our students will be serving the needs of our people. I'm very, very, very happy.
The Ministry of Health has a plan that from 2024, each academic year, more than 8,000 new students will be admitted to universities offering medical programs. Enora Gladys, RwandaTV News.
Thank you, Enora, for the details. Now moving ahead, the LER Institute has brought together policymakers, subject matters experts, and practitioners commemorated the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers, also known as Red Hand Day. We have more with William Evans.
This year's International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers, also known as the Red Hand Day, was held under the theme Grave Violations Against Children and Beyond, with particular focus on emerging trends, threats, and the pathway for action.
So I think that some of the things we want to focus on is how can we look at areas that maybe at times are looked at distinctly and differently in terms of international law as well as policy and practice, and look at where there are moments that we could bring those aspects together to find new solutions and new ways to be able to deal and understand these matters. So a lot of times, for example, trafficking isn't thought about in terms of armed conflict context. It might be thought of about more in terms of an international criminal dynamics, and certainly what we want to look at as there's moments for us to look at both of those dynamics and where there might be new ways to address it and new trends and approaches. Similarly with detention, for example, we want to look at the dynamics related to children because there's very specific protocols that have to be observed about how to treat children differently in situations where they might be detained because of being associated with an armed force or an armed group. That is one aspect. And we really need to look at this in terms of the long-term consequences that bad approaches on addressing detention could have on children in the long term. Things such as sexual violence that we want to address. We also want to raise issues that are related to not just thinking about sexual violence in terms of girls and women, but also in terms of like how it impacts men and boys from a variety of perspectives. So these will be some of the areas that we'll focus on. And certainly the interconnectedness of these particular violations. Sometimes children could have one particular violation that they're facing, such as recruitment and use, but then they may also be exposed to other violations at the same time, like being exposed to sexual violence, or potentially they could be trafficked from one armed group into a criminal network as we progress through, the different phases of conflicts that exist.
According to the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion, Rwanda has no child soldiers and has for long moved to professionalize the force, and also has laws in place to protect children from any of such cases.
The use of child soldiers is not only an abuse of children's rights, but also a grave violation of their basic needs and rights to, for instance, education and a lot more. And in emergency situations, having children armed is a grave mistake and should be looked at as a taboo. We are supposed to do all it takes to protect all children against such violations. In Rwanda's context, to safeguard safeguard against these foes has been professionalized, and all recruitment processes and procedures are clear and open. Announcements are often released for anyone interested in joining. Security organs and guidelines to follow highlighted. The selection process is followed to the dot. Our laws also protect children from doing certain job.
His Excellency Ambassador Frederick Ngoga, Senior Advisor on International Partnerships on Regional Peace and Security Mechanisms at the African Union, says that the African continent has 17 conflicts, and all these have children involved with armed groups, and some of them are as young as 12 years old.
We have about 17 situations, or I would say conflicts, on the African continent that the EU Peace and Security Council is seized with. And in all those 17 conflict situations, one thing that is certain is that you have children who are involved in these armed conflicts. They are involved with armed groups, and it can be as young as 12 years old. So this is something that is of great importance to us, and we have a platform which has been put in place by the EU Peace and Security Council. We have the Banjul process, and we are all trying to see how we can address this issue. But first, starting with sensitization, to sensitize governments. I will also say that there has been a lot of signing of agreements between different governments, but we're looking into the implementation of those agreements. Yes. So overall, it's a bleak picture. But we are working to address some of these issues.
The Alail Institute is building a holistic approach to preventing children's recruitment and use in armed violence, while pursuing the ultimate vision of building a world where children are at the heart of peace and security. William Evans, RTV News.
Alo, waramutse shiri wanjye.
Utekereza ko guhora wivuganya n'umushu aribyo birenze? Natwe niko tubibona. Ubona nta cyakurutira kugaragaza impano yawe. Niko bimeze.
So guys, uyu munsi tugiye kuganira tugaseke. Agaseke njye gafite byinshi. Kamari, ese wowe kakumara iki?
Manudi. Halo Manudi, niba iki uri kunkura mu kazi?
Hero mabusha, byahiye kandi noneho bimeze neza cyane. Ukuntu biri no guhumura.
Ako Manudi, urumva nakumva ko ibyo bihumura koko?
Ubona nta cyakurutura umwuga wawe. Erega, natwe niko tubibona. Dushyigikiye buri kimwe agaciro mu buzima bwawe na irekure nshya. Buri wese arahishiwe. Wikwisondeka. Kanda akanyenyeri 150 urwego. Uhitemo agaseke kawe ka packs zo guhamagara. Cyangwa akanyenyeri 345 urwego. Uhitemo bando za internet uryoherwe n'umuvuduko wa 4G.
You're still watching RTV News. Now let's take a look at what is happening beyond the borders of our country. The Nigerian government says it wants to raise its profile as a hub for agriculture exports in 2025 through what it is calling the Earn from the Soil initiative. The program is also an attempt to reduce the nation's dependence on oil revenue. We have more on this.
Moses Diogo, a 59-year-old retired civil servant, has been farming for nearly 30 years. On his 10-hectare farm, he grows rice, beans, and peanuts. He hopes to expand production under the Earn from the Soil initiative. Diogo says with an equivalent of $2,000, he believes he could significantly increase his production.
If I'm able to get 3 million naira, it will help me more, because last year I planted about 2 hectares of groundnut. But this time around, I said by the grace of God, at least between 4 or 5.
Funded by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the initiative has allocated over $32 million for low-interest loans to smallholder farmers, tax incentives, and plans to create more export zones for global market access. It is focusing on expanding subsistence farming into larger-scale agricultural operations focused on high-value crops like cocoa, sesame, cashew nuts, and ginger for export. Diogo says while this is a good initiative for farmers, he's yet to access government grants or credit support.
I have tried in such a way that at least the procedure, how to get this support. But I tried. All of these proved abortive. But at times when this thing comes, it is difficult for some of us to meet up with the procedure, to know a person, to this and that. Even though it comes, there are some selected ones that normally would not help.
Agriculture contributed about 22.6% to Nigeria's overall GDP and made up about 5.4% of its total exports in the second quarter of 2024, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Abuja-based agribusiness consultant Bridget Okpokoro says there's room for growth, but infrastructure issues need to be addressed.
So we need to increase our capacity of production. We are not able to do that yet because the smallholder farmers are not empowered enough to be able to take on this challenge. Another reason why we cannot export is that I don't think we're meeting the standards of exporting outside the country.
Okpokoro says targeted policies and training to empower smallholder farmers and align with Nigeria's export goals.
If government can come in or other stakeholders can come in and create policies, for example, tax reduction, tax incentives, policies that will make it easy for the farmers who are ready to export.
For Nigeria to meet its 2025 goal of becoming a leading agricultural exporter, experts say it must turn ambition into action by educating and equipping smallholder farmers with modern tools and supportive policies. For Gibson Emeka in Abuja, Nigeria, Anthony Labruto, VOA News.
Tomorrow news, inflation in the United States increased in January as prices of food, gasoline and housing, among others, continued to rise. Economists talk about what the Trump administration can do to bring prices down. VOA once more.
Inflation in the United States is not yet under control. The Consumer Price Index rose 3% in January from a year ago, according to the latest report by the U.S. Department of Labor. Economists say several factors drove the jump.
The cost of housing is still going up. Services were still expensive. Good prices were going down, largely from recoveries from the pandemic, and that progress is largely stalled.
We are doing pretty good in terms of the unemployment rate, which means people are working, people are making money, and when people do that, they spend, and that high spending is keeping prices high.
Although analysts say he inherited an overall stable economy, U.S. President Donald Trump blames inflation on his predecessor, Joe Biden.
This was caused by Biden. I had 4 years of virtually no inflation. So I'm just taking over.
Economist Allison Schrager says some measures proposed by the Trump administration could bolster the economy.
Particularly corporate tax cuts, potential more tax reform, some of the deregulation will also boost the economy.
Consumers are not expected to get relief when it comes to interest rates. But there are other measures that can be taken to ease the cost of living, experts say.
You want to support the free market as much as you can. The other thing is we want to stimulate the production too.
Berisha noted that inflation is a global phenomenon and that compared to other countries, the U.S. economy, even with modest job growth in January, remains in good shape. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
And this story brings us to the end of tonight's bulletin, but before we leave, a reminder of the top stories that made the edition. Rwanda finds that Belgium is deliberately overlooking the root causes of security issues in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Those involved in cross-border trade, particularly between Rwanda and Bukavu, report that business activities have started to return to normal. On the international scene, inflation in the U.S. increased in January as prices of food, gasoline and housing, among others, continue to rise. That brings us to the end of tonight's bulletin. On behalf of the entire news team, Thank you for being with us. Have a productive week ahead. Take care and goodbye.
turabasuhuje kandi tuhaye ikaze ku makuru iteganyijwe